Morning. I'd like to call the Audit and Finance Committee meeting for February the 16th to order. I have a couple of things I just want to go over. First of all, this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube to meet the requirements of the Sunshine Law for virtual meetings. We have some new committee members that I would like for them to introduce themselves. The first is Matt Beeman. I believe he's having some audio difficulty. Are you there, Matt? So I'll just introduce him. Matt is a CPA and he is with Adams and Company in Winter Haven. So he joins us as a new member of the Audit and Finance Committee today. Next, we have Terry Loretta. Miss Loretta, will you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning. I am a staff accountant with CPS Group CPAs, formerly Bayless and Company CPAs, and I am a former teacher for Polk County School Board a few years back. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. Thank you. Mr. Bernard Fultz, are you on the Zoom meeting yet? Mr. Fultz is a retired CFO for Central Florida Healthcare, and he joins us as a new committee member today. And then we have Miss Doretha Brooks. Would you introduce yourself, Miss Brooks?
Good morning, everyone. Doretha Brooks. I am retired from the Board of County Commissioners.
Thank you. It's good to have you, Miss Brooks. And then since we have so many new members, I will let the existing members introduce themselves. Mr. Travis Keys.
Good morning, Travis Keys. I am not a CPA, commercial banker with Center State Bank.
Thank you. And Dr. Hahn. I think you're with us, Dr. Hahn. Can you unmute and
I had to unmute. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Bill Hahn. I'm with Southeastern University, CPA, and teach that intermediate accounting course. So,
thank you so much. Is Mr. Tom Jennings with us? Mr. Jennings has been on the committee since 2017, and he has his own business, and he's probably right in the middle of tax season, but we're glad to have him as well. So our staff members from finance, please say hello. Heather.
Sorry.
Looking for my mute button.
That's okay.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Lisa Hester, Director of Accounting.
I'm Heather Jenkins, the acting CFO.
And I am Jason Pitts, former Senior Director of Finance, and I'm back on a contract for the district.
I believe I saw Mr. Jennings. Do you have audio where you can say hello, Mr. Jennings?
Hello, sorry, I'm late.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. I just said you were probably in the middle of tax season and
Oh, yeah.
very busy.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes, good to see you.
You too. Okay, and then we have Cece Gill, an internal audit. Cece, say hello.
Morning, everyone. Senior Internal Auditor.
And we have Sean Finney, internal auditor.
Good morning, everyone.
All right, so I think that's the introductions. I do want to say that Mrs. Kay Fields is our new school board liaison for this year. She had a conflicting appointment and will be joining us a little later this morning. So we have our external auditors with us from Clifton Larson Allen. Lance Schmidt is the partner, and they are going to go over the district audit results. I'm going to turn it over to Lance now.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And just wanted to confirm I'm able to share my screen for the presentation as well. looks like I can do that. Let me just give that a try really quick. So just want to confirm, are you guys able to see the presentation? All right, good deal. Again, just want to introduce myself again. My name is Lance Schmidt. I served as the engagement principal on the audit for the Polk County School District for the year ended June 30, 2020. And with me today, I've also got Andy Osborne, who is the manager on the engagement and assisted as well. So it's a pleasure to be here and present the results of this audit to you. At any point in time, feel free to stop us. We've prepared a short presentation just to kind of make sure that we cover the highlights and the key points related to the audit. You should have also received a complete copy of the CAFR along with our audit reports and also a governance letter. If you don't have those, let us know. We can try to get those to you as soon as possible. But if there's no other questions, we will jump right in to the presentation. If you have not heard of CLA, I just want to recap who we are. We are the biggest public accounting firm in the nation. We've got over 100 offices across the country and roughly 7,400. And really, we're highly organized by industry. The myself and Andy Servin is our state and local government practice. We do. So if you ask us a tax question, we have people that can help you with you, but we again specialize in. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that or not, but there appears to be a noise coming through. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but all right. So with no further ado, we'll kind of jump right into the results of our audit. I always like to start off any audit presentation really just recapping exactly what you've hired us to do. The first, obviously, is reporting on the financial statements, or as we commonly refer to it as the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Again, you should have a copy of that by now, but we do obviously issue an opinion both on the footnotes and financial statements and other related schedules within that CAFR. In addition to the financial statement audit, we also do a compliance audit. This year, we looked at 3 major programs as part of our federal single audit. That's going to rotate every year. There's going to be certain programs that we look at that'll get highlighted, and generally any of your larger programs are going to be tested at least once every 3 years, if not more frequently than that. In addition to that, we also issue an examination report. That examination report is required by the state of Florida and covers certain requirements of the investment of public funds related to the school board that we basically review and make sure that any of the cash deposits are held within a qualified public depository. Then lastly, we also issue a Florida management letter. The Florida management letter covers various state compliance requirements and requires us to take a look at certain things that we've done, and then and then also any other compliance or recommendations that we have as part of our audit. We're able to report that in that letter as well. So I just want to recap again, just briefly. Just to kind of give everyone just kind of a scope of what this audit looked like. And again, I know with our audit and finance committee members, we have a lot of CPAs and other folks with an accounting background or finance background. And so I just want to give you a couple highlights here. Start off with just kind of the scope of the time involved with this year's audit. Again, with this being a first year audit, we spent a little bit of time just learning a little bit more about the school board and investing some additional time. It was roughly 1,500 hours worth of time, so it was no easy lift. There was a lot of time and cooperation both on the school district side and also the audit side. That was comprised of 8 different team members that assisted us with the audit, including a national quality reviewer that specializes in GASB engagements and really made sure that Andy and I and the other team members were really giving you a high quality audit. We issue 4 reports, or 3 reports in a management letter, which we'll recap the details of those in a second. And then as part of our engagement, we do depend heavily on data analytics. We imported roughly 868,000 transactions into our data analytics software, resulting in close to close to $31 billion worth of debits and credits. Again, that's absolute value numbers that we were looking at. So again, a lot of transactions that we look at there, but again, just kind of gives you a little bit of a scope of what our audit required. So I mentioned that you should have received a governance letter, which should have been a 3 or 4 page document that again, that covers all of our required communication with governance. And I just want to recap the highlights of that. Any of the qualitative aspects that we wanted to highlight would be in that report, and we'll talk about some of the qualitative aspects of the audit here in just a second. If we encountered any difficulties when performing the audit, we'd be required to report that as well. I did mention this was our first year serving as your external auditor for the school board. Glad to report that even with COVID-19, we were able to issue a timely audit this year. Again, there was certainly a lot of challenges, and we'll call them challenges because we were able to overcome all of them. Nothing that kept us from issuing a timely audit. We were on site as well for the audit. Our team is based here in Polk County, and was able to be on site and work closely with your county and finance management team. Any corrected or uncorrected misstatements, or another way to put that would be audit adjustments or past audit adjustments, will be in that letter. We had 1 corrected adjustment and 1 uncorrected misstatement that are listed in that report. If there's any questions, I'll go over those. One of them had to do with an estimate related to the prior year with insurance, and the other related to an estimate on recording revenues at the end of the year. So again, we're able to get one of those reported, and one of them wasn't material, and it wasn't worth a restatement. And so that's listed as a past adjustment. If we had any disagreements with management, when we talk about disagreements with management, we're talking about items of a professional nature that, say, your CFO or finance director or accounting team says, we disagreed with the treatment that, maybe we challenged something and said this needs to be a certain way, and they disagree. If that happened, we'd be required to report that. We do ask key members of management to sign a management representation letter, basically stating that the financial statements, to their knowledge, are true and correct. And then lastly, if there are any consultations with other auditors or CPA firms, so if management of the school district said we would like to consult with another CPA firm on a particular matter, whether that be compliance or accounting related, we would be required to, or that other CPA firm would be required to consult with us before they issue advice or recommendation, and we would tell you about that. But again, glad to report that there were none. So again, just a quick high-level summary of our audit approach. Obviously, there's certain areas that we want to look at closely, that we want to do a deep dive on, that we feel are critical to our audit. Management over audit controls, obviously a big one, where we test journal entries and do our data analytics to potentially identify any management override of controls. Obviously, payroll is a big component of the school district's financial statements, and we did extensive testing in that area. The same with revenue recognition, payables, accruals, and other liabilities. Again, making sure that those are recorded in the proper year, especially given a very budget-driven organization like the school district, looking at that both ways, not just the unrecorded, but also making sure that the items recorded are legitimate and recorded in the correct period. And then information technology. Obviously, this is a big deal for every single government, every single organization today in 2021. And so certainly that was a big component of our audit as well, as we took a look at those controls. And then grant compliance, for the obvious reasons that there's significant grants going to the school district. We want to make sure those are properly being accounted for and treated correctly. And so if there's no questions on just a high-level recap, I want to just go over the results of our audit on this page. I mentioned that we issue an independent auditor's report on the financial statements. I'm glad to report that the school district received an unmodified opinion, simply meaning that we were able to say everything was materially correct, and we didn't have to say except for. If we had any exceptions, we would not have an unmodified opinion. We would have a qualified or adverse or other type of opinion. So again, congratulations to the school board on that. Secondly, we issue an independent auditor's report on internal control over preparing those financial statements and other compliance matters. This report doesn't necessarily issue an opinion, but if we had any findings, we would be required to report those to you. We had no material weaknesses, which was good. However, we did have one significant deficiency related to time and attendance reporting. What we found there was in our sample, we found instances where either certain employee benefit time was not properly reported or identified on the timesheet, or the timesheets were not being approved. And so, again, the details of that are going to be in the audit report, and including management's response to that finding. Then we also issue a management letter, which I mentioned earlier, is where we look for various compliance requirements and any other recommendations or lesser significant compliance items that are noted. This year we did have a comment on the budgetary control. Specifically what that means is making sure that the county is only spending funds within the budget that's been approved for that particular fund. This is a repeat finding from last year. So you had the same comment last year. We obviously wanted to follow up on it and make sure that was addressed. And we found 3 funds this year where, again, the expenditures exceeded the budgetary control for that fund. So again, wanted to report that. And again, those details are included in the report. The last portion I want to report on is our recap of our single audit report. Again, this is our report on compliance. When we're doing a single audit, we're going well beyond just the numbers, but looking at other types of either operational reports or other items related to our single audit testing. There were 3 programs that we looked at this year. You can see those CFDA numbers, IDA grant, Head Start grant, and the Improving Teacher Quality State grants. We do issue an opinion on compliance. I'm glad to report that the school district received an unmodified opinion. Again, meaning that the county complied with all material compliance requirements related to these 3 programs that I just mentioned. If we had any material weaknesses, generally that's going to cause a qualified opinion. Glad to report that we had none to report. However, we did have a significant deficiency related to subrecipient monitoring. Specifically what that represented, or the item that we identified there, is a requirement in the Code of Federal Regulations that does require a subrecipient agreement be entered into between the school district and the charter schools. And so we again evaluated that for materiality, to say how big of a deal is this. There is some monitoring certainly that happens over the charter schools. However, it is a requirement to have a formalized subrecipient agreement, and then that subrecipient agreement be monitored. So again, it didn't rise to the level of being a material weakness just due to the oversight that is already exhibited as it relates to those charter schools. And then our last item in our governance letter, we also wanted to just highlight just some key information technology recommendations that we noted. And I should say there were many other recommendations that we had noted to the accounting and finance team throughout the course of the audit. Many of those were just verbal recommendations, things that are lesser significance that, as we see at other governments that we work with or other school districts, that we'll share and say, hey, this is what we saw here, this is what we saw there. And you might just want to consider, implementing that best practice. So this is not all encompassing, but these are the more significant ones we did want to communicate. As it relates to information technology, a couple of high-level things that I wanted to note here. One, I would notice that the school district does not have a formalized information strategic plan. Now, certainly there's some forward-looking happening, and this is being done on an informal basis, but we really recommend that be a top priority, especially given the recent headlines that we have with various hacks and ransomware that affects so many of our organizations. Secondly, the district does not have a documented information security program that includes the policies and requirements for provisioning access, passwords, and system authentication. Now, certainly these rules exist and these controls exist. However, it's not documented in a formal way that allowed us to kind of easily get our hands on that. So from a succession planning perspective, and again, just communicating the information technology structure. We recommend that that policy be formalized. And then lastly, the last two items here really relate to scans that were done for vulnerabilities on the IT network. Again, there were 45 devices that were no longer supported by the vendor. That's important because once it's no longer supported by the vendor, it means any holes in security are not going to be patched. There's not going to be additional support. And the same thing with vulnerability scans. Generally, those are going to be patches or updates that need to occur to various systems to make sure that everything is properly secure and that the information technology platform is as secure as possible. So with that, I know that was a lot of information, but I just want to pause right there and see if anyone has any questions related to the results of our audit or any of our comments, findings, or other recommendations. All right, hearing none, I want to turn it over to
Lance, could I just,
Yeah.
you did a great job of anticipating the questions I normally ask. So, but looking forward, what is there a risk area that you would be concerned about going into the next year? Other than the technology area you just covered?
Sure, no, that's a good question. But certainly anything that we identified in this year's audit, we want to follow up on in subsequent audits to make sure that those are addressed. Information technology still being a big one. And then I would also say, there's going to be some potentially, most likely, based on conversations we've had with Lisa Hester and others, regarding CARES Act money or new federal grants that may be coming down related to coronavirus response or relief. And so I would want to say that would probably be a higher risk area, just to make sure that proper controls are in place, that those are the various compliance requirements that are identified, and making sure that the school district's able to comply with those, because that's going to be an area that's going to have a lot of spotlight and a lot of attention going forward.
Okay, thanks.
Alrighty, I'm gonna go ahead and take over. Can you guys hear me all right? Good deal. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys a few high-level overviews of the financial highlights. One of the things that we look at each year is just the general health of the organization. And a lot of times that's identified here in the general fund balance. And as you guys can see here, over the last 5 years, this purple bar represents the unassigned fund balance over the last 5 years. So this 2020 was a good year for you guys to have kind of that transition back up into an upward trend. So I'll go into a little bit more detail here on the next slide. One of the things, this is just a graph that shows the basically unassigned and assigned fund balance as a percent of the expenditures. And this is kind of important just because it shows a little bit of the liquidity of the school district. And so as you can see here, back up to like 6.04% for unassigned and assigned fund balance. And I think the total fund balance as it relates to expenditures is about 9.5%. So this just kind of shows a little bit more of the health of the organization as they're able to kind of pay for expenditures in the coming years. So moving on, I'm just going to give you a little bit more of a general fund recap. A lot of times the general fund increased by 24.9 million during the year, and this was caused by a few things. There was an increase in revenues. The majority of the increase was related to the Florida Education Finance Program, which increased 27.5 million. There's also an increase in expenditures for instructional services of about 22 million. Both of these were kind of offset by a transfer basically into the general fund from capital project funds. And these help in just the maintenance for the related expenditures for the capital items that the school district has. One other thing that I would like to note is just that the local sources increased by about 10.6 million for some Hurricane Irma reimbursement. This hadn't occurred in previous years, but got reimbursed this year. So that kind of helps add towards that general fund unassigned fund balance. So moving on, there is a few new GASB pronouncements coming forward soon to be effective. So I just wanted to put that on kind of everyone's radar. One of the first ones here is GASB 84, it's fiduciary activities. And one of the things that we can do here as a district is just kind of identify the fiduciary activities that are ongoing. This is going to be a lot of the internal funds that you guys have. So we're going to kind of identify the fiduciary activities, evaluate kind of based on this GASB 84 criteria on like what is fiduciary activities and how is it going to be reported. One part of that is going to make sure that everything is reported correctly. And then one of the things that this GASB does is it revises part of the financial statements, which will now have a change in net position for fiduciary activities. So those are some of the highlights for GASB 84. I did want to touch on also GASB 87. This is a new GASB related to leases. And this basically helps the entity and the users of the financial statements understand a little bit more of like an all-inclusive single model for lease accounting. This is going to be a big deal for a lot of the governments in that fall on GASB. And one of the things we can kind of similarly do is just identify leases that you currently have, or as you're entering into new leases, kind of evaluate the criteria kind of with the GASB 87 lens, and kind of help potentially develop some new policies related to identifying and the procedures that are related to like reporting on these leases. So those are the two new GASBs. One of the GASBs that is my favorite GASB to date is this GASB 95. If you can have a favorite GASB, this would probably be it. So this GASB really is, all it does is postpone effective dates for a lot of the other GASBs. So GASB doesn't often give us less work, but in this kind of time, they postponed a lot of the work. So as you can see that the postponement of effective dates for these GASBs and the authoritative guidance as far as the implementation for these were delayed by either 12 months or 18 months. So that I think makes the effective dates for the school district fiscal year 2022. So not this year, but the following year. So we get a little bit of time to implement, but certainly never too early to kind of start wrapping our heads around what's required and how to proceed when it's actually required to be implemented. So those are some of the new GASBs that we have. And then this is some of our COVID-19 resource pages. So this is if you want any more information about what CLA has or anything like that. There's a good resource page on our homepage. So with that, I'll kind of turn it back over to Lance.
I appreciate that, Andy. I just want to say publicly again, thank you to Lisa, Heather, the entire team, Kevin, that helped us out. There were many people that were involved in the audit, including many on the compliance side that I didn't mention. But I just want to publicly say thank you. Obviously, it's a challenge anytime you have a change in auditors. It's usually a lot of work. But given the fact that we also had to deal with COVID as well this year, I think our teams worked really well together. And I just want to say again, thank you to management of the team, management of the school board, and again, congratulations on a good audit report. And at this time, if there's any questions from the Finance Audit Committee, I'd be glad to take those at this time. All right. Carol, I'm not sure if I'll turn it back over to you if there's any other comments.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much for that presentation. Very informative, and we appreciate working with you this year. If you're welcome to stay, or you can exit the meeting if you want. We're going to go ahead and go through our finance update and then our internal audit update. So thank you, Lance and Andy, very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Excuse me 1 minute, Carol.
Yeah.
In case you're going to hop off, Lance and Andy, I want to say thank you so much for making our first year with you easy. And I also want to congratulate Lisa and say thank you to her and her team, because they worked tirelessly as well throughout our holidays and did a really great job. So thank you both.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I also want to thank Andy and Lance. You have an excellent team, and I agree we all worked well together, and we struggled at times, but we made it through, and thank you to both of you and your team.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So at this time, we need to elect a chair of the committee. Our previous chair's term has expired. And so I spoke to Travis Keys. He has been on this committee since 2018, and he serves as co-chair of the Attendance Boundary Committee for Polk County Schools and is on our Citizen Screening Committee for the Superintendent Search. And he has expressed his willingness to serve as chair of this committee. So I would like to put his name out there and then open the floor to see if there are any other nominations for chair of this committee. Seeing none, then I would like to vote for Mr. Travis Keys as chair of the Audit and Finance Committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Okay, approval is unanimous then. Congratulations, Mr. Keys, and thank you so much for doing this. At this time, we'll move on to our finance and investment update for the current year. And we'll turn that over then to Heather, our acting CFO.
Carol sent you all the November financials earlier last week, or at the end of last week. So our main highlights are our revenues are 1.4% less than prior year. However, our expenditures are lower as compared to the same period last year by 4.98% and actually running 6.64% below the budget, which leads us to page 12. At this current point in time, we have a 6.58% fund balance. That is largely attributed to funds that we rolled forward last year when we ended 2020, and also unfilled positions that we have in the current year. When we spoke to the board, or I spoke to the board at our last board meeting, we emphasized that we're still unsure where our funding is going this fiscal year. We have a representative that is at the legislature. She works for our district and is working with the finance and budget committee teams to bring us information. So we're still not certain of where our FEFP will end up next year and what portion of this fund balance we need to maintain to get us through the lean years. Our board policy is 5%, so we have exceeded that a little bit. Our investment update, we sent you our quarterly performance review for the period ending September 30th, 2020. Our GDP has increased and is projected to decrease again a little bit and then maybe go back up. Our economy is a little bit unstable still at this point from the effects of the coronavirus. So in looking at that, it's expected to remain flat. Our labor market, there's still nearly half of the 22 million jobs that we lost last March and last April have not been filled. So we have a very high unemployment rate. That's also leading to very high unemployment claims for the districts, all the districts across the state of Florida. So we've seen increased bills as well as have the other districts. We spoke, or Lance and Andy spoke about the CARES Act. We are anticipated to receive $123 million in CARES Act funding if it passes and if it is sustained. We don't yet have clear guidance on what those funds can be used for, but we've started the conversation about how we can use them to strengthen our schools and get us through the remaining portion of our pandemic. And the last thing I want to talk about investments is on page 13 of the report that Carol sent you. You can see our month-end yield is 0.35, 0.25, 0.39%. We were in the 1s, 2s, and 3s last year at this time. The good news is we have $401 million invested, and we're still earning on those funds, but it is at a greatly reduced rate. Do y'all have any questions?
I have a question, and this might have been mentioned before. Have other funds come in through the CARES Act already?
Yes, ma'am. We, as a district, we received 34 million. About 24 of that was for the district to use. The other portion went to charter schools and private schools. We've purchased computers for the students, for those that are doing hybrid learning, and also the ones that are strictly at home on our Polk virtual system. So we have an amendment we're preparing to go ahead to pay for a lot of the extra labor we had during the 2 weeks that we were shut down in March last year.
And then you're still looking hoping for another 123 million on top of that initial funding.
Yes, ma'am. And we were very fortunate. We received, as Andy and Lance spoke about, close to $10 million. It was a little over $9, excuse me, from the Board of County Commissioners, which we were able to buy a lot of PPE and different things to send out to our schools. So the county provided us with some really great support as well.
Question on page 13.
Yes.
The last column, the weighted average maturity reset in days. If I'm reading this right, most of those investments are less than a year, so there wouldn't be a lot of interest rate maturity risk in the portfolio. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
That is correct. Our main priority with our investment policy is safety and liquidity. So yes, you are correct.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah, because at some point interest rates are going to go up. So as being short, you won't get hammered on the valuation side. So, yeah.
Right.
All right. Good.
I have a question. So how much have you been affected by the per student allocation based on a reduced number of students coming to the classrooms this year?
At this time, we haven't been affected at all because there is a Protection Act which holds us harmless. Had we been funded at the amount of students we actually received, we would have lost about $17 million. However, we've been held to our second calculation funding and is expected to go through the end of the year. We've been advised next year that will definitely change, and we will receive what we should be funded on our accounts.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I guess your bottom line is that the school board is not in bad financial condition at this point with the size of your reserves?
Yes. Yes, we're actually in good shape. The word around the state amongst all the other finance officers is that we're just uncertain about what our funding looks like in the future. It'll probably take a couple of years to get us back to solid ground, and it's just providing the schools and our employees with what they need while maintaining enough fund balance to take care of us in case the worst would happen. Well, thank you all for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Heather. Now we can move on to the internal audit services update. As far as staff changes, we hired Sean Finney the 1st of December in the position of internal auditor. Sean graduated from the University of Central Arkansas and has over 15 years of accounting experience. And his family recently relocated to Florida, and his wife and mother-in-law are both teachers with our Polk County Public School System. Sean, would you like to say a few words?
Sure. As Ms. Matthews said, my wife and I decided to make a move to Florida from dream we've had since we got married. So we finally decided to take the step while our kids were still young and could transfer and transfer into the transition easily without having to make new friends as much since they're still young enough. I have 3 boys ages 6, 8, and 10 currently, so they're still at that point to where they could transition to something like this. So we decided to take the jump and live out this dream we had, and we are both very excited to be here, both loving the school district at this point and looking forward to a long career here and learning a lot of stuff.
Thank you, Sean. We're excited to have Sean. So now we can move on into, we seem to always have investigations that pop up, and of course they kind of take priority. Cece's kind of become our resident investigation guru. So she worked on most of these. I'm going to let her talk to you about the ones that we had this last, it's not really a quarter because it's a little over a quarter since our last meeting, but Cece.
All right, the first investigation we had was one that we mentioned last meeting, actually. It was with the Lake Gibson High School Athletic Booster Club. A former school employee, she's retired since this investigation began, was maintaining the books for the booster club, and we identified a cumulative fund balance discrepancy of $42,000 between her records and the bank statements. We've since turned it over to the sheriff's office. We received an update from them in December that the investigation is still ongoing. They've had to pull a lot of subpoenas to subpoena bank records, and that just takes a lot of time. So they're still working on it, and hopefully they'll come up with a result soon. Our second one was with the Bartow Archery Boosters, and that's with it's Bartow High School and Union Academy combined. The Summerlin Academy principal kind of oversees it because it's run through the Summerlin Academy campus. She noticed a discrepancy when they turned in their annual financial report at the end of July, that some of the figures didn't agree with the prior year AFR that they turned in. After we looked at it, we contacted the treasurer. She agreed and admitted that they were just using guesstimates to fill out the report, and that nobody in the organization really had any accounting abilities to be able to keep their books. We issued a report with some findings that we came upon, such as checks only had one signature, the receipts weren't on file for all the expenditures. So we issued a report and gave them a checklist that we give to our outside organizations on different policies that they should be following. And the principal suspended them temporarily until they hired someone that could do their books for them accurately. They have since hired a CPA to do their books, so they have been reopened, and hopefully they'll proceed without any issues.
Let me just interject there. It's not that we require a hired CPA or a hired accountant. We have volunteers do this all the time, but this particular organization just chose to do that, to hire someone. So we're certainly not going to tell them they can't. That's a great idea if they can do it, and they can't find a volunteer that's qualified.
Thanks, Carol. Then we were contacted by the Employee Relations Department concerning West Area adult P card usage. The assistant principal of West Area adult was accused of making purchases for personal use using the district's purchasing card. We didn't find any evidence of this in our review, but we did notice that many purchases were being delivered to the secretary's personal residence. Myself and the Employee Relations Department went out to the school and discussed it with the assistant principal and the secretary. And apparently they were having problems with the post office. They locked their gates at night, and the post office was either throwing packages over the fence or not delivering them. So the assistant principal made the decision to have the packages delivered to the secretary's house. They were advised to stop doing this and to rent a post office box and have them delivered there. And then Gene Odell Learning Center. We received a complaint. The secretary at Gene Odell was being paid to attend college classes. We also went out, talked to the principal, obtained records, and found that she was being paid, but being paid through sick leave to attend her classes. While policy says you can't be using sick leave, we informed them that they had to change that and have her use up her vacation leave or personal leave. That has since been
corrected. We had
corrected. Thank you. I just lost my train of thought.
Change all that sick leave to personal or vacation leave to the extent that that was available. And then if not, then it had to go into some leave without pay. But the complaint itself that she was just being paid her regular working time while she attended college classes was not accurate. But the school just misunderstood the type of leave that they could use. They thought they could use any leave. And so she had a lot of sick leave balance and she was using that. But school board policy limits the use of sick leave for employees or immediate family members due strictly to personal illness or death. So, you know, that was a learning experience for them and they've corrected all of that. So go ahead, Cece, sorry.
Okay, thanks. No, I just lost my train of thought and it's good that you can jump in. So anyways, those are the 4 investigations we had going on. Like Carol said, we routinely do different audits around the district, but when an investigation comes up, we have to jump on that. And that takes precedence. So Carol's going to continue with the rest of our activity.
Did anybody have any questions or comments about any of the things that Cece covered? Okay, so payroll audits is a routine audit that we continually do. So we finished up the 19-20 fiscal year payroll audits, and then we issue a summary report with a bar graph that gives the most common findings. And we issue that to all schools because we select a sample of schools to do an audit of, but we issue this summary to all schools and departments so they can see the types of findings we typically have and be better prepared for a future audit. We rank those findings in the order of occurrence, and then we did a bar graph over the past few years just to see the trends, and hopefully that's a learning tool. We also did a purchasing card expenditure audit. The district for 19-20 had about 570 purchasing cards assigned to administrative personnel. Purchases totaled $3 million, and they were used to make purchases of varying needs with, we look at the budgeted funds and Title I funds because our internal accounts auditors pull any expenditures made in the internal accounts and test those expenditures. So we exclude those from our audit and just focus on budgeted and Title I funds. So we did a sample of 17 schools and departments, 19 card holders for last fiscal year, looking for any non-compliance with established purchasing card procedures. And we make recommendations to correct any deficiencies. We look at 1 month and then we scan the entire year for just anything that would pop out that would look suspicious or that might need further research. So in total, we covered over 400 expenditures. We look for any order splitting, meaning, there's a cap on how much you can spend. So we want to make sure that people aren't like splitting up an order to stay under that cap, because if it's over a certain amount, they would need to go through our our purchase order system and follow a different route rather than using their P card. We look for any disallowed purchases. We look for proper accounting coding, whether sales tax was charged on exempt purchases. And we make sure receipts and documentation is on file to support the expenditure. And the accounting staff performs an ongoing review of purchasing card activity and notifies the cardholder of any possible violations. So that's a very good internal control, where they catch a lot of things before, we would ever do that in an audit. So we had a couple of departments that had no findings, but the rest of them had one or more findings of some sort. And we again summarized those findings and did a bar graph to show what from most common to least, just so again, all schools and departments can see what we're finding and maybe learn from that process. But each new card holder is required to attend training before they're issued their card. And then an online course is required each year as a refresher for all card holders and their staff that's responsible for any purchasing card accounting. Any questions on that? Okay. So then we have also during this time frame, the internal funds audit was completed. Carr, Riggs and Ingram has been doing that audit for, I think they're in their 7th year, and they sample 100% of the schools, and they audit the internal funds, which is field trips, dances, fundraisers, things of that nature. So we had 141 schools and departments that were included in that audit. And the district received a clean opinion on the financial statement. But of course, they have those compliance findings. And they were typical, though. They were reasonable. Let's see, the average number of findings per school was 0.79, which is within a normal range expected by the auditors. And 40% of those 141 schools received findings, but most, 90% of those, had no more than 2 findings. So overall, we were pleased with that. The Carr, Riggs and Ingram firm, they've already presented to the school board the results of this audit. And just to give you kind of an idea of the size of the internal accounts or internal funds, it's kind of used interchangeably. Last year, total revenues were 10 million and expenditures were 10 million. Ending balance was 10 million. You expect to see whatever funds were raised to pretty much go out. So they're doing the right thing there. And again, we do a summary of the internal audit did a summary of the most common findings from Carr, Riggs and Ingram's audit of internal accounts. And we issued that to all schools. So that's all I have. If we have any more questions, or if we have any questions or comments from the committee.
No, I would just say those look like typical things we see quarter by quarter. But I would like to add to what others said. Only one required adjustment and not many proposed ones in the audit. Financial folks and the internal audit folks are doing a good job. Well done. So.
Thank you, Dr. Hahn.
Carol.
Yes.
One question I had about the comments by the external auditor was the comment about the technology strategic plan. Did they give you a format of what they're think you ought to have, or is that, I mean, I'm just not familiar with that technology strategic plan. Are you?
Heather, did they give us any feedback on the strategic plan for IT?
Didn't receive any directly. I'm not sure if they had conversations with Lisa, but I plan to follow up with our assistant superintendent of IT.
Okay.
I was going to say, I believe it might have gone through Dr. Tina Barrios because they work directly with them on the technology part of it.
I see Lance back online. So do you have anything to add, Lance?
Yeah, we could, if the district's looking for something, we could provide an example. The main point of that strategic plan is just making sure you're anticipating future changes, both in terms of technology, just the fact that technology is changing so quickly, but then also covering that cybersecurity element, making sure that's a top priority, because that's a never-ending process of making sure that you've kind of hardened the core and that your key systems are safe and not subject to bad actors. So, but certainly we'd be glad. The folks that helped us with that IT review, they're members of our team that we work with closely, but they are not even accountants. They are true IT professionals. So they could certainly, I'll be glad to kind of connect them with your IT folks. They can talk even more about it.
That was the purpose of my question, because that is an area that I think that everybody has to be concerned about today, especially large organizations. So whatever's in that strategic plan is got to be pretty tight and technology firm.
Correct. Yep. And certainly they, like I said, we've got the folks that can assist or provide that additional insight. So.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
I have a question. Since the technology piece is so critical, are there currently any available funds to get started on that right away? Since we saw the problem with, I think it was Osmar last week, the week before last.
We do have a current technology budget, and depending on what we're implementing, we may be able to use some of the CARES Act funding. So we will definitely make that a priority.
Thank you. Those are great questions. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Seeing none, our next order of business would be to set the meeting for next quarter. Wednesdays are not good for certain committee members. Are there any other days that are, off the table for anyone, or time of what week of the month, or any preference there?
No Mondays, please.
What's that? No Mondays?
No Mondays.
Okay, no Mondays, no Wednesdays. Okay. So tentatively then, not tentative, if we can agree on it, then how about Tuesday, May 4th at 9 a.m.? Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for your time and for attending the meeting. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And you all are doing a great job. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Brooks. I appreciate
it.
that.
I remember back in the days.
Yes, yes. Yes, Ms. Brooks served on the committee many years ago, and things weren't as bright. So thanks. Everybody have a great day.